Good afternoon, and welcome to the Idaho Federation of Families monthly parent webinar. We're pleased this afternoon to bring our third annual panel presentation for a discussion on the Jeff D. settlement, which is now, yes, Youth Empowerment Services. I'm Carol Dixon. I'm the Family Support Coordinator, and I'm also have been a member of this project for a while as someone who served on the mediation team that lasted about 18 months, and then have been involved in various work groups and the governance team and the implementation work group. So I'm going to start with asking everyone on our panel to just explain who they are, what their involvement is in the project. We have a great combination of parents, professionals, and our plaintiff attorney. So with that, I'm going to ask Vanessa just to kind of roll off and tell us a little bit about how you got involved in the project and what you've been doing.
Hey, my name is Vanessa Morgan. I'm a parent. I'm currently serving as the chairperson of the interagency governance team for the project. I've also been involved in a couple of their work groups and committees. And I'm really excited to help get more parents involved in the project too.
And I'm Howard Belodoff. I'm an attorney here in Boise, and I have been representing the class, the children who compose the Jeff D. litigation, and have been for since 1980, since the case was first filed in court, and have represented the interests of the class and the parents in board and negotiating settlement agreements and the latest plans to implement a new standard of care for providing services and supports for children and families who have mental illness.
I'm Pat Martelle. I'm one of the project managers on the project to implement the Jeff D. settlement agreement. And my background is clinical social work and public health. I've worked on the project since the beginning and participated in the mediation process that developed the implementation.
I'm Linda Miller, and I'm the parent that's on the committee. I am working on the practice manual committee right now, and I had worked on the child and family team group and the group that was working on the crisis.
Okay. Before we get started, I wanted to highlight some of the things that are going on as it is Children's Mental Health Awareness Month. And there are several things that we have statewide and also here in the Valley that are happening. In conjunction with the Region 4 Youth Behavioral Health Committee, they are doing several events in the area. One of them has already concluded, and it was the 6th annual statewide Awareness Week poster contest, which invited kids in 3 different grade categories to create a poster addressing the theme. And this year our theme was keeping the ball rolling for children's mental health. There'll be prizes that are given in each grade category with an overall statewide winner, which will be selected from all the regional winners. So that's the selection, and the announcement for that is coming up. But the kids have already submitted posters, and they've got a great assortment of artwork that the kids have sent in. We also have 3 live webinars. The first one, you're joining with us for right here. The second one is coming up actually tomorrow, and it's at 10 a.m. And the topic of the webinar is suicide prevention and the ambitious goals of the Zero Suicide Project. And this is featuring Kim Kane, who is the manager of the Suicide Prevention Program at the Department of Health and Welfare. And you can watch this on YouTube, or you can watch it on Channel 67, Cable 1, or TVC-TV. So the third webinar is going to be on May 4th at 1 o'clock, and this is a discussion of the upcoming screenings of the film Resilience. And Resilience, for those of you who joined us last year, is a sequel to the film Paper Tigers. The screening is sponsored by Optum, the Speedy Foundation, the Children's Trust Fund, and the Federation of Families. The program will feature members of the sponsoring organizations and a discussion on the screening, the panel and the workshops, and the significance of the film. You can watch the webinar on resilience, again, on cable 67 or on the TV, CTV. And then on May 6th at 12:30, Boise Youth Move is sponsoring an open mic program. I mean, this is a really exciting, it's a first time opportunity for this. So this is for youth between the ages of 12 and 18, and it's going to take place at the library on Cole and Eustick in Boise. And then on May 13th, we're going to feature 2 screenings of the film Resilience at Boise State. The first screening starts at 10 a.m. and is geared towards professionals and will be followed by workshops and a call to action session. A second screening is going to be in the evening, and there's going to be a panel discussion geared for the community at large, and that's going to begin at 6:30. Both of the screenings and the workshop are going to be facilitated by the film director, James Redford. And then they're also, for those that are outside of the Boise area, you're going to have opportunities to see the Resilience film. It's going to take place in other regions on May 11th in Twin Falls, May 17th in Fort Hall, and May 22nd in Lewiston. There's no admission charge to participate in any of these. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and jump into our discussion on the YES project, and I've asked Pat Martelle if she will start by providing us kind of an overview and an update, because there has been a lot that has occurred since we met last year. So Pat, if you will kind of share some information with us, that would be great.
Thank you, Carol. I have a PowerPoint presentation, which I We have been doing a lot of work on the project. The slides will show up momentarily. And we have made a lot of progress since last year. So probably most people realize that in the beginning of such a large project, there is a significant amount of time in the beginning that is focused on planning and strategy development. So we'll start with these slides. They appear to be up now. So this is this year's status report. So the objectives for presenting this information is to give you a status report of the update, where we're at with the project, to build a system of care for children with serious emotional disturbance. We also want to take this opportunity to invite you to participate. The last slide of this presentation has the information about how you can contact us if you'd like to be a part of the project. A lot of people don't know the background with the project. It began in, the lawsuit began in 1980, and partners in the lawsuit are Department of Health and Welfare, Department of Juvenile Corrections, and the State Department of Education. For many years, the state worked to address the issues in the lawsuit, and they did make some progress, but they did not satisfy all the terms of the lawsuit. Beginning in September of 2013, the court ordered the state and the plaintiffs into a mediation process that lasted until December of 2014. Out of that work, a settlement agreement was developed and approved by the court in June of 2015. The following year was spent on developing the implementation plan, which was approved in May of 2016. And since that time, we have been working on the Empowerment Services Project. Our plan was finalized for that in September, and we have been working since that time to develop the strategies and the tasks associated with fulfilling all the requirements that are in the settlement agreement, all working toward building a system of care by 2020. So when we talk about what a system of care is, we are talking basically about a model that has a framework with an organizational philosophy that is about collaboration across agencies, improved service and improved access and expanded services, as well as services that are coordinated, community-based, and culturally and linguistically competent. So when we talk about what a system of care might look like, this illustration shows all the partners that are part of a system of care. This model has been around since the mid-'80s, and across the United States, approximately 36 states and jurisdictions have implemented these models and are coordinating the systems that you see in that illustration. I usually like to orient folks to the largest items in our project plan. I divide it into two. The first half of the project plan has to do with services and supports, the new ideology, which is the principles of care, and also about improving access to care, which involves the development of a checklist, a screening tool, and operating a system that has no wrong door. The second half of the project has to do with the creation of the infrastructure, which is the offices, the staff, workforce readiness, resources, and all the processes that are needed to make this new system work. We will also be having a system-wide due process system so that anywhere in the system, complaints are received in the same manner, tracked in the same manner, and lead to fair hearing processes if they need to, if they are not resolved before the formal steps are taken. Also, we are engaging in partnerships with the other state agencies I mentioned, and we are formulating legal agreements between us so that we all work in unison and fulfill the obligations of the settlement agreement, with each of us fulfilling our separate roles. And then finally, we will pay attention to the quality assurance aspect of all of this work. We refer to that as transformational, collaborative outcomes management, which is a long term that basically means we're going to collaborate with each other as partners and collect the data so that we can make decisions based on data. So what everybody wants to know is where are we? So what do we know so far about the Child and Adolescent Needs and Strengths tool? That's the CANS tool. And basically what we're talking about today, as we said in the beginning, is more of an update as opposed to an education about these very basic components of our work. So if you have questions about what these concepts are that we are talking about today, please let us know. There's a feature on this program where you can send in questions, and then, as I mentioned on my last slide, there will be web addresses that you could also use to send in your questions if you have any. So what do we know so far about the CANS? We know that serious emotional disturbance, which is the characteristics of the children that we are talking about in this lawsuit, that is a combination of a diagnosable condition and a functional impairment. Functional impairment refers to how one behaves. We have determined that we will measure functional impairment using the CANS tool. The CANS will determine the level of functional impairment and will replace tools that are currently in use, the PECFIS, the CAFIS, and the CALOPIS. So what's new? We will begin state staff training in May, later this month, and that will go through July. State staff will be operating a pilot of the CANS beginning in September, and that will run through until the beginning of November. Following that, training will begin for community providers beginning in January to June. We will be operating a pilot by community providers beginning in February of next year. By July of next year, the CANS will be deployed statewide. Okay. And then the next slide refers to the CANS tools. So we know right now, because of the settlement agreement, we will be creating a checklist, which is a tool that would be commonly used by anyone who has an interest in trying to assess a youth or a child's functional impairment. We know that we are going to have a screening. The screening is for professional use, and there will be training for the screening, and ultimately the screening will be automated. And then we know that we will have the full CANS instrument, We will have the screening tool in development later this month. And the next item about the measures with quality that I referred to as the TCOM, that is in development and will be completed by 2019. At that time, all the partners will be sharing data so that we can talk about children across our agencies and all work from the same page so that we work in a coordinated manner for the youth. The next big topic that people like an update on has to do with access. So what we know so far is at Department of Health and Welfare, the Division of Family and Community Services, they will use a version of the CANs. The Department of Juvenile Corrections detention centers will use the CANs. However, a family can go directly for an assessment. They do not have to go through the checklist or through a screening in order to access assessment. So what are the developments we know of? We will have an independent assessment process. That is a requirement of the Medicaid rules under which we will be operating the new system. The request for proposal, the seeking of the contract process, for those of you who are not familiar with that term, that is happening later this year. The contract will be awarded for an independent assessor, and that contract will go into effect in 2018. Another development is Boise State University is working with us to assess the capacity of the provider network in Idaho. That is something that is very important to us, so we make sure that we have enough professionals around Idaho to deliver the services that will be in the new continuum of care. And then lastly, on access, I want to mention that our workforce development plan, which has been in review and is now posted on our website, will be initiated later this month. Class membership. What we know is that all youth in Idaho with serious emotional disturbance who have not reached their 18th birthday will be eligible for the Youth Empowerment Services program. Those are the JEF-D entitlements. This program will be covered chiefly by Medicaid. There has been a statute change that goes into effect in January of 2018 that changes the federal poverty limit for a youth qualifying for Medicaid. It moves that line from 150% to 300% of the federal poverty level, which is a very exciting change because that means that very close to 100%, but not 100%, but in the high 90% of all the children in Idaho who need to access these services will be able to access them through the Medicaid program. If a family has over 300% of the poverty level, they will still be able to access the services, but will participate through a cost-sharing program. News around this is that because it is a new level of Medicaid eligibility, necessarily the division that handles Medicaid eligibility at the Department of Health and Welfare, and that is the Division of Welfare, they are working with us now on the project so that they can develop the automation that is necessary to operate an alternative Medicaid eligibility process for youth. I put a slide in because a lot of times people, when I mention the change in the federal poverty level, people are not necessarily commonly aware of what the federal poverty level guidelines are. Now this is from 2016, but they changed very, very lightly or slightly across the years. So if you look at the poverty level guidelines and you look at a family of 4, 300% of the poverty level is $72,900. So if a family's income was at that level or lower, then a youth in that family with serious emotional disturbance would be able to access this program. So a lot of times people ask us, well, how many children are we talking about? And so what we know so far is in working with Boise State University, we did come up with an estimate that there are approximately 24 to 31,000 children in Idaho who fit this description. Analyzing Medicaid data, we have determined that there are approximately 21,000 children who are presently accessing services. Further, we have traditionally used an estimate based on recommendations out of the research literature that approximately 5% of a state's population of children will meet this criteria. In Idaho, that number is 21,574. So historically, we have been estimating quite accurately about how many children we have that meet the criteria. But what is the news? Right now, across our agencies, we are working to figure out how to more specifically identify these children. There are various indicators we can use. If a child has had at least 3 hospitalizations, or if we look in the claim system and we see that a child uses more than 3 psychotropic medications, those can be strong indicators that a child has a serious emotional disturbance. But we are trying to put our heads together to come out with a more accurate measure so that we can estimate at any given time how big our system needs to be to meet the need. And we will be doing the estimate and publishing it at least annually. Okay, next slide has to do with the services and supports that I know families are interested in. What do we know so far? Out of the legal agreements, there are 26 categories of services in Appendix C of the settlement agreement. Out of those 26 categories, we have worked with stakeholders for the last year to identify what services and supports need to be defined out of these categories. And these stakeholders have identified over 30 services and supports. They have also put their heads together to develop and talk about a crisis response system that spans the entire state and spans all systems that work with children. We have also chosen the National Wraparound Initiative as the wraparound model that Idaho will use for this population. Medicaid has applied for a 1915I, is the name of the waiver program that I was told today is technically not a waiver. It's actually a state plan amendment, so we'll correct that on the slide. But that application has been developed and is presently in review. That application is essentially requesting of the federal government, the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid, our federal partner, is asking them permission to change the way Medicaid operates in Idaho so that we can expand Medicaid to 300% for these children. And just by virtue of them meeting that criteria and having a serious emotional disturbance, that they can qualify for this program. So what do we know as of next? We are going to be working on developing our practice manual. The practice manual is a requirement out of the lawsuit. That will be basically the guideline for all the stakeholders, providers, families, and anyone in the communities interested. It will give them guidelines about how the system operates, what services are there, and how it all works. The first version of this manual will be published in September of this year. We are working on contracting with Portland State University to secure a training arrangement so that we can begin our training on the Wraparound Initiative. We also will be working to formalize a crisis response, and here I've used the term task force. That's not an official name, but we are naming the work ahead of us where we want to coordinate across systems so that when someone in one of our communities has a crisis, that we respond in a coordinated way and that we don't let that child and family fall through the cracks, that we engage them so that we can then hook the family up with whatever services would help them move away from the crisis and return to their stable family functioning. We expect the Medicaid amendment, not the waiver, to be approved in 2018. And we also expect the first new services to be rolled out in 2018. People also ask us about the Child and Family Team, which is a new feature of the system. So we basically know there will be 3 levels. There is the Child and Family Team approach, there is the Child and Family Team that is formalized, and then there is intensive care coordination, which is a facilitated wraparound process with a Child and Family Team model. What's ahead of us this coming year is to separate out what distinctly happens in each of those tiers so that we can put that content in the practice manual and train providers and families to it. Finally, I want to share with folks all the opportunities that are still available for them to participate with us on this project. We have work groups and committees listed there, including a parent network. So any parents that are interested in working with us, please give us a call. We also have various work groups that I've listed there. And we also have committees that are forming. Some committees are already formed and some will be formed. I've listed them all there. If you have an interest in any of those, or if you have an interest in any aspect of working with us on the project, please give us a call, send us an email, or otherwise contact us, and we will be very happy to bring you into the fold and get you connected. So there is my contact information, the contact information for our website, the address of the Idaho Department of Health and Welfare, the link to CAN's information if you would like to research more of that on your own, and the mailbox underneath my phone number. That is our dedicated mailbox for anything you would like to send in to ask us a question via email. So that's what I got, Carol.
Okay.
I'm ready for questions.
I know. Well, Pat, that's a lot of information. It's a lot to absorb. You all have worked fast and furious in the last year, and just the ranks of people that have been involved in the project has really swelled. I mean, you've gone from a kind of a small team to a large number of people. And I think that's one of the strengths is just the diversity that you have included, because you have people from all various systems. Parents have had a super strong voice in this process, reaching out to the community, to community partners, and also to Boise State. So I think when you bring all of those to the table, I think you've really seen, some robust ideas and plans that have developed from that.
We really have. Thank you, Carol. And we are looking forward to adding to.
Yes, keeping it going. There's
Yes.
still more space. We still need more voice. So my first question is to the parents, is that for Vanessa and Linda. So as parents who have gone through the system and you've met lots of challenges and obstacles along the way, and you now kind of are on the inside seeing how this is developing, what do you get excited about? What do you feel hopeful about from the perspective that you've kind of behind the scenes? Linda, you want to start first?
Okay. I'm hopeful about the crisis system, especially the changes that we're making there. I am also hopeful about the idea of a child and family team and having a more integrated approach where I'm not having to do a lot of the legwork and in connecting the service providers that we're using. I think those two things
Okay.
I'm excited about.
And those are some of the ones we hear the most about, particularly the crisis response. That's been on the top of a lot of parents' lists. Yeah. Vanessa, what about for you?
I would echo the same things that Linda said. Also, I am looking forward to being able to get the services that we actually need rather than twisting the services that are available to see if we can make them fit what our family's actually looking for. In the new system of care, we'll be able to actually just get the help that we need rather than jumping through hoops to make other services work for our special situation.
Yeah, what we're doing with filling in that continuum of care, right now there's a pretty big gap between a hospitalization and a weekly counselor's visit. And filling in that gap And in that continuum of care, I think is a priority for the team, and it's probably one of the hardest things we're working on. But it's what, with all the new services that have been suggested and that we're trying to roll out, I think it will do that.
Anything rolled out to date that you all are using? Respite? Okay. So respite is one of the new services, one of the first ones, yeah, that a lot of families have accessed, and that would kind of was part of the Jeff D. settlement. Okay.
Yes.
So Howard, like, for having been involved in this process for such an extended period of time, what do you see as different? Because you've kind of ridden the waves of this settlement agreement over the last 37 years. Do you feel like this time there's a shift in the philosophy and the commitment and just the way this, the dots have lined up? Kind of what are your thoughts about?
Well, it's.
And we need you to speak loud,
It's
please.
it's a rather large undertaking, no question. So, I kind of think of it, we're going from no to yes, hopefully. And I don't think that the acronym was created for that purpose, but when I heard it, that's what I thought of. Because like many parents, we were faced with a lot of no's. And I think that credit goes to not only the people sitting at this table, but many others who have worked on this project since we sat down at a larger table in a larger room that has only gotten bigger and bigger, which is a good sign. And it has taken just in the last few years, it seems like it has taken a long time to get where we are today. But I don't think we need to look back. I think we need to look forward. And what has transpired in the last year or 18 months is kind of what I would view as the foundation. If you can picture a house, you have a foundation. First you have that excavation, and that was maybe the first 35 years. But then you have a foundation and to build on, right? You build on it, and you frame it, and you put the roof on it. But the guts, the plumbing, the electrical, turning on the lights, making sure the water works, the toilet flushes, and you take a shower. That's the stuff, that makes a house that you can live in. And so Pat and others, through all the agencies, engaging the parents and the providers and other stakeholders, including myself and other members of the group of attorneys that now represents the class. We've been going along and trying to help influence and hopefully, keep the pressure on to make sure that the promises and the purposes of the lawsuit of many years ago, it really hasn't changed that much. Community-based services, continuum of care. I've been hearing about these things for decades. It's always been the same. What hopefully is different is that there's a new approach. There's an acceptance that things need to be done. There are things that are being done with the collaboration of many agencies and even within divisions of agencies to get it done. They have, I think, good leadership, and I think they have gotten the support. So things. I'm hopeful that things will progress, and now we're in the phase where people out there, the parents, the providers, the other members of the community, will see actual progress.
So big shift over 37 years.
I can say that what I've been involved with in the last few years is a lot different than in the previous 35 or so years, going into a room and really just not really accomplishing very much, and not seeing much accomplished. We have the work groups we've talked about. We have additional staff. We have the Medicaid component. and many others. I don't think we can cover everything today in this short period of time. So I do encourage people to go to the YES website to look at the settlement agreements, the implementation plan, and the other documentation that has been placed on the website and will continue to be placed on the website, and hopefully that will really reflect the progress that's going to be made over the next 12 months to 24 months.
So as you mentioned the webpage, one of the things that I want to point out that to me is exciting because it really does show how seriously the state is taking parent voice. When the state created their initial YES website, there were some parents that kind of went, this just isn't really usable for families. It's not, we don't find it like super parent friendly or youth friendly. So the decision was made that they were going to partner a parent with some of the folks on the work group that represent the state and really allow that parent voice to kind of emerge in what would create a website that parents and youth would find easy to use, information that was accessible, written in a voice that they really spoke to them. And a couple years ago, I don't know that would happen. So to me, Pat, that really represents the commitment you all have made to wanting to know how youth are going to use information and plugging them into places where they're making that happen. So that's significant.
I think that is significant, Carol. I think the other thing about it that the state is appreciating is how rich the information is that the parent brings to the conversation. So, a lot of, in the professional world, our tradition has been that through our education and experience, we know the best thing and how to go forward. But the truth is that parents and people who have been through this and who have lived it really have the information that needs to be applied to how you create and run a system for families and children. And so that's what we have now. And it's early days, but we definitely have recognized the value of the parental voice. And our latest thing is we're working on formalizing the youth voice. Because we're trying to establish now having a youth council so we can get a very dependable youth input as well.
So taking that in a step further, so for our parents, if we have a new system of care that is kind of family-centered, strength-based, what does that mean in terms of the role of parents when you have the child family team? As they're starting to access services, as they're becoming involved in a new system, how is that going to change the role of the parent? And what do parents need to understand at the point in time when they're engaging in the YES system, that's when the house gets done? Do you feel like it's going to be different for parents?
I feel like right now I make a million different phone calls to try to learn about what services and what providers are out there and what maybe will or won't work for our family. I look forward to being able to sit down with a child and family team where there are other people who know what resources are available and can help us get in touch with the right resources. I also look forward to having a stronger voice in treatment planning. We work with some really wonderful providers, but the usual system is we talk a little bit and then they create a treatment plan and then bring it back to me to sign. I look forward to creating that plan together as a group so that it can be really focused on what our family needs and not just what the provider usually does.
Well, I think part of our effort is the acknowledgement that the parent or the caretaker is the most knowledgeable about the child, not the professional. And so in that way, the new system is trying to shift that the caretaker, the parent, and the youth are in the driver's seat.
One of the things we've been trying to, I'm on the child and family team committee, or I was when it was meeting, and one of the things we were trying to weave in to all of the verbiage that was happening and all the steps and all the levels was a parent education, and give it at every opportunity, giving that parent information about how the system runs but also about the diagnosis that their child has. And I feel like that in and of itself will enable a parent to speak up a little bit more clearly for what they want and for what their child needs. And as you spoke of, it really is the parent who is, we don't need to be an expert in the field of mental health, but we are an expert in our child. And that empowers us to have that education, empowers us to be that, and we really are the boots on the ground working with that child first and really 24/7. So it's the parent that needs to be activated and empowered in this.
Right. And so I'm so glad to hear that you say that they are very aware of the need of parents to have information and education, because I would think it's going to be very unsettling for some parents who have not felt like they've had a voice and they haven't been empowered, and all of a sudden they sit down and it's like, so what are you gonna do? So that need to get that information to them, to prep them, to have somebody working with them so that they can be effective in what is really a new role for parents in this process. Good. I'm glad that's taken place. So Howard, like in terms of the areas of project development, implementation, where do you think the greatest challenges the state's going to have in making this happen? Any ideas in terms of where you think there are bumps on the road that we need to be looking at and ready to address?
Well, this is not going to be easy, or we would have done it many decades ago, I guess. But sure, developing services and supports on a statewide basis. So it doesn't really matter if you live in Boise or a small rural community in Idaho County, that you will have access to services for your children. And just the scope of the services. Many of these services don't really exist. There aren't providers because they were never going to develop if the state wasn't making those types of services available to children, whether you just didn't get them or you had to go out of state to get them. So certainly the scope of those services, crisis is a critical component of that. Funding, so that has always been a problem because these things are not cheap to set up a new system. And that led to the development, as Pat indicated, with the new Medicaid eligibility criteria under the 300% amendment. So that's going to make a huge difference because it's going to be a Medicaid match and not just general funds. Along with that comes the way Medicaid is delivered in the state of Idaho through a managed care provider, Optum, at the present time, and they're going to have to change the way they do business. They're going to have to change the way they deal with parents. They're going to have to change the way they deliver services. That has to be worked on, and it's going to take renegotiation or negotiation of different terms under the managed care contract. Another area where I think it's critical and it's difficult is the whole workforce development. You got to have the people to deliver the services, and I think that's going to be a huge issue, and we have a plan, but it's going to take a lot to implement that plan. It probably has to be modified over the years, and to get the workforce in place to deliver this. And just the whole change of implementing the principles of care and the practice model, the collaboration, as Pat mentioned, with the agencies working together instead of all these, we call them, I guess, silos, and then a parent goes to each door and they got to go through different things and they got different requirements and they got to call different people and they're told 3 different things, and that just never worked. And so we're trying to, so I think that has to change. And of course, we've talked about the engagement, allow parents to have a voice, but they have to also support that so they can participate in these meetings and let their views known. I can tell you, having sat through hours of meetings, that when the parents are there, they really do make a difference. They really make an impression because they're talking about their personal experiences that people on State Street may not, they're not aware of. They're, it's kind of sterile. Even for me, it's kind of sterile. They bring it home because they talk about what happened in their communities, in their homes, when they had to go out and try to navigate a really complex and uncoordinated system. And so, a system of care really is that. It goes from point A to point Z. And we have, if you go to the settlement appendixes, you will see access models, practice models, that really lay out what should, how a child can get access to the system, how they will be treated within the system, and hopefully, the result will be a positive one for all involved and beneficial to the state, because dealing with these issues at the earliest stages, avoiding the crises and the hospitalizations and the residential care is really the most cost-effective and most effective way to deal with it.
Mm-hmm. So using your analogy of the house, so we may have a great blueprint of like what the house is supposed to look like and all the things that are supposed to go into the house, but if we don't have the resources for the materials or someone who can do the specific windows that we're looking for, countertops, we'll get stuck. So it sounds like the blueprint exists, and it's putting the pieces together kind of is still going to be a challenge.
Yes, most definitely, and moving forward. There's a lot that's going to happen in the next 24 months, so we can be ready when the whole thing should be done, and hopefully be done. And it's going to take a lot of work and effort and cooperation and money and a different way of thinking. And it is going to take a whole new change in philosophy and attitude. But it's been shown throughout the United States that this is the most beneficial, cost-effective way to proceed.
Yeah, so it's kind of helpful having somebody out in front of us. Pat, you were.
I was just going to say, sticking with that analogy, getting the permit to build is what we're waiting on, because the federal government has to issue that, and so we're dependent on our federal partner to approve the request to build the house.
So, Pat, one of the questions that we hear, being that Idaho is a very rural state, I think one of our biggest challenges is, and what we hear from many of our parents is, I can see that happening in some of the major cities, but how are those services going to roll out when you live in rural Idaho? So how's the state addressing that challenge? What are your thoughts along that line?
Well, I can share a little bit of information. Howard mentioned the workforce development issue. We do have a workforce development plan, and we are working with Boise State University to assess the existing network in terms of what are all the resources and where are the gaps. And then we are also working on professional contracts with other universities that have done this type of work before in other states. So we are bringing professionals in that have some experience doing this so that they can help us in sort of a train the trainer sort of approach. But the other thing I think is important for us to mention is that we live here in Idaho. We all know that this is a professional shortage area, and this project is not going to remedy that. What we are going to do, in sticking with the analogy, is we're going to build a framework, and that whole framework of the house over the years will slowly get added onto and will become a very robust structure
But when we launch, and as right now, in all the way up until 2020, our goal date, we will have services in place, but we will have some years ahead of us to make sure that everything operates in every single corner of Idaho with the same quality that you can expect in any of the larger cities. We do intend to make use of telemedicine technology. There are also some other cutting edge technologies out there that we are exploring. But again, this does take financial resources, but it is part of the process where we are defining the problem, which is the workforce needs development, and then we are developing strategy around how to address it. Then we are going to execute on the strategies beginning this month, which involves training, retraining, and then strategizing with other experts from other states who have done this before so that we can expand out into our rural areas. And then also adding on more of the technology approaches.
So, Linda and Vanessa, parent involvement, and Howard and Pat have both kind of mentioned this a little bit. How do you think this, your all being at the table, has shaped the plan that's being developed and the way that services are rolled out, or the way that professionals are viewing families? How do you think it's made, what difference has it made, do you think, by your being present?
If I can speak to that first, the old way of doing things was a fail first model that parents were very frustrated with. They would be told, you can have this service after we find out that this lesser service doesn't work. So a child would fail for 6 months or so before they'd be allowed into a higher level, if it even existed. So I'm really glad that kind of model has been, we're going through and taking out that kind of verbiage everywhere, and the CANS tool is going to help with that, where we can learn about the child through using a tool rather than having to wait and observe them over a long period of time, while that developmental clock keeps ticking. And the committees have really listened to us on that one, and we've spoke up quite a bit about that.
I feel like my voice has been very valued. Everyone at the department has been very appreciative of my participation and the comments I make. And it's helpful for them to get a picture of real life. Lots of people in the department are parents. Not a whole lot of them are parents of children with a serious emotional disturbance. And so they are removed from the experiences, and it's really important for them to get some firsthand knowledge to get to know the parents who they're working to serve. You can't really serve somebody if you don't really know them. There's really too many to mention little incidents where I've been able to make a comment that changes the course of the conversation and the discussion. And so I feel like people are taking us seriously. The state is listening to parents, and they want more of us. They want more stories, and they want to be able to respond to us. They can't do that if we don't show up and talk. So please, more parents, come join forces. Your stories are important, and now is the time to be sharing them when we're in these early stages, so that things can move the right direction now instead of happening one way and then needing to tweak later on to fit our needs.
So when we're on that topic, there's multiple ways, because not everybody's going to be able to come and participate in work groups at the level that you all have, and that's a huge commitment. On the continuum, how else can parents participate? What do they need to know that's out there in terms of parent groups or surveys, or how can they connect? How can they get that voice and that story heard?
There is a parent network that you can find on Facebook. It's just called Parent Network, or you can look up @ Idaho Parent Network to find us on Facebook to connect. There's also a survey going around for parents to begin sharing your stories and a little bit of information and get connected with the parent network. And the link where you can find that survey is idahoya.org/parent network. No, sorry, that was wrong, /parent voice. And if you go fill out that survey, then you'll be able to receive emails from the parent network to stay connected. There will be other surveys in the future. If you would like to contribute but really don't have time to fill out work groups, joining the discussion on Facebook and participating in surveys is a really valuable way to get your voice out there. There are also other opportunities to review materials. If you don't have time to come into Boise for a work group meeting, but you'd like to review some documents before they go live, you can let the parent network know or get in touch with Pat to join a work group remotely or to review documents on a case-by-case basis. There's really every level of involvement that you're interested in. We can come up with a way for you to get involved.
Okay. And again, I can't overstate the impact that Parent Voice has had on this process and how responsive the state has been to taking it seriously and kind of molding the program around what the needs of the families are. And the current survey that is out there right now is looking at crisis response, and then just also gathering some general information about those who are using mental health services. I know the discussion for future ones is looking at like discharge, be it from inpatient treatment or from residential programs, also in terms of respite, what families' needs are with respites. So a lot of the surveys are going to be in regards to topics that the work groups are looking at and where they really would like some of that parent input. So, please do not underestimate the power of your voice and the power of your story, and to share it when you have an opportunity, be it with families that you're working with or other folks that you know that are in, kind of have a similar journey. Where am I with my questions? Let's see. Oh, Pat. So how do parents find out as services are happening or are occurring? Because it's not going to be like a turn on the light switch, like all of a sudden. So it's kind of things are going to be building. And how do they know that a new service is available?
Well, so the vision right now is that we will have 3 phases, if you will, of rolling out services. So right now, I don't have an immediate count of how many services exist right now, but I do know that there are approximately 14 or so services that are coming that Medicaid has not previously reimbursed, that will be reimbursing in the future. What we expect is that services will become available in 2018, in 2019, and in 2020. The exact schedule of those services has not been determined yet. That goes back to us getting the quote-unquote building permit from our federal partner. But as soon as we get past that, then we will have a more concrete idea of when we're going to be able to roll out specific services. When anything new is added to the benefit package, then there is generally a campaign of announcement. So there are ways to add printed message onto the I'm forgetting the technical name of it, but when existing providers send in a claim and they are paid, the documentation that they get back, there is a way for us to put a printed message on that announcing anything new. We will be working with newspapers and all sorts of media to announce every time there is a new service. We expect to use the parent network as a communication device, also the other technologies I was referencing previously. And then we will also, through our webpage, be making announcements about future dates. So it's not like a person would have to go to the website in time to see the announcement. We will have announcements way ahead of time and available so that if you anything you check casually, you would get that announcement as soon as it's known to us.
One of the questions we've gotten is regards to the slides that you reviewed. Will those be able to be posted on our website so people can go back and review them?
Yes, so it's up to IFF if you'd like to post it, but
Okay.
we will have this posted on the Yes website.
So on the Yes website, they'll be able to find it. Okay. And also let to viewers know if anybody has questions, there's a live chat box. So if you will write your questions there, I will certainly share those with the panel as we go along. So one of the questions we had from parents, that one was covered. Will there be cross-education for local resources for families that are struggling with, like paying rent, utilities, buying food? These factors can really affect a child's mental health if they're always worrying about being evicted, or no water, lights, or going hungry.
You know, that is such a great question because that's right. The social determinants of health have recently been recognized as being quite significant, and you can't ignore them. A person has to have food in their belly and a roof over their head before they can think about the mood that they're in or how they're going to control their anger. The scope of the project does not extend to those types of issues. Housing, employment, the status of someone's home or whether or not they have food in the cabinet. However, the recognition that that is relevant is a part of our conversation.
Mm-hmm.
So when we talk about a full continuum of care, one of the things I always like to emphasize is the prevention area. And in particular, prevention is kind of tricky because it's very hard to measure something that you prevent from happening. So it's hard to get it funded. It's hard to measure that you were successful with it. And so sometimes it's hard to get folks to focus on the need for it. For instance, it might be well known that in working in suicide prevention, one of the things that is a very positive thing is to pay attention to the positive aspects that a person has in their life. That you don't just try to prevent bad things from happening, but that you make sure good things are happening too. That there is a support system, that a person does have someone to talk to, that they do have enough food, that they aren't cold. All of these things are relevant. But what we are going to do is work in that prevention category as we are working to build our system of care. But that is not a distinct part of this project, even though we recognize that it's relevant.
Okay, thank you. Another question we have is, will there be anyone to walk a parent through the system? What protocols does a parent take if they aren't being heard in their local area?
Again, real good question. Do you have something to say to that?
Well, the goal of creating a child and family team is to answer that problem. Creating those child and family teams is going to be a problem, especially in rural areas. But I think having that approach and being aware of the approach, that now this is a teaming effort, I think that will help partly.
Carol, I can address some of that.
Please.
So one of the objectives of the implementation plan, and as part of the settlement agreement, is what we call due process. And I am involved in the due process work group, and we're still looking for a parent if anybody's interested. And so due process, that's a legal term, but let me break it down. So when a family doesn't think that they're being treated correctly or they're being provided what they need, they will be able to make some sort of complaint, grievance, however you want to call it, and there will be a process in place so that in a timely manner, or if necessary, expedited, where those issues can be raised and resolved, and if not there, then it would go through maybe a more formal process. But some of the alternatives that the committee, the work group has been looking at is having what the Department of Education, they have a similar system, what they call facilitators, you can call it mediators, where you would have someone who's really trained in how the system works or should work and what can be provided, assisting the parents to navigate the system and try to resolve any issues that arise with the agency that's involved. So that's currently being worked on, and we're very aware that that is an issue.
This one might kind of overlap. Sometimes paperwork for services can be cumbersome and confusing. If a family doesn't understand how to fill out the paperwork, is there going to be someone available to help them do that?
Oh, the short answer is yes, definitely. Part of what we are trying to add to the system is a whole new engagement process by which the professional involved works with the family from day one to make sure the family has a good understanding and has all the materials that they need, and that they understand the material so that they can then operate their child and family team.
One other thing that I think will help with that is that the CANS tool is to be shared across agencies. I'm very hopeful that using the CANS is going to drastically reduce the amount of paperwork that parents have to do. We won't have to fill out entire huge intake packets this thick for every new provider, because they will have access to the CANS that was already completed.
Yeah, or fill out all that paperwork only to be rejected from the service that you're trying to apply for. And, yeah.
So the last question I have is, and this is for everybody to answer. So over the past year, when you reflect back, like, what has surprised you about participating in this process, or what you've learned, or what you've seen? Anyone want to take a stab at just
the thing that surprised me the most is that my family would continue to have crises while I'm on trying to do this work, and that sometimes those crises would be so timely and relevant to what we were talking about. That has surprised me.
Yeah, I'm not sure if it really was a surprise, but I have been very pleased with the level of support I've received from everyone over at the Department of Health and Welfare. The parents are really respected in this project and really appreciated, and every time I go downtown for a meeting, there are people asking about, well, how are your kids doing and how can we support you in being here? But our voice matters. So I've been very pleased to feel appreciated and supported. If you just look at my life and the schedules I have with my kids, you wouldn't think that I have time to do any of this. Really, I don't. But this project is very important to our family, and there's been a lot of support to help me participate so that the project can get done right and then make my life easier.
Well, I've been delightfully surprised as I have come out of my bureaucratic silo, if you will, to learn about so many dynamic things that are going on around Idaho from different entities that really are focused in the same direction that this project is, which is to put youth and family first and to help them get out of the system. And as I have met folks from all areas, the school system and in the justice system and out in local communities, the amount of people that are already focused on this is very exciting. It encourages me a lot that we are on the right track and that this is going to happen for Idaho.
Howard? What surprised you? What have you been wowed by in the last year?
Well, I wouldn't use the word surprised. I would use the word encouraged. So I'm encouraged by the fact that the process is one of what I think is openness, more transparency, the willingness to listen to concerns, to answer questions that arise, to deal with problems or issues that may have not been necessarily identified, and that there is an interaction between all the diverse groups that compose this whole process. The juvenile corrections deals with things differently than the Department of Health and Welfare, and the Department of Education deals with things separately as well. And then you throw into the mix all the concerns we raise about the difficulties that the system currently presents, and how to work through those, and how to put in place the necessary conditions that will hopefully ultimately achieve success, and dealing with any of the little issues as well as the big issues that arise, and you just take one success and you build on the next success. And these are little things, whether it's the amendment waiver or getting additional staff for behavioral health. I think they got 18 additional staff to work on this. This stuff is not going to get done, with 3 people working on it. And maybe, we didn't want to drive Pat to early retirement. I think we drove Chuck into early retirement, but we need Pat's expertise and dedication to get us to the end game. So hopefully the resources will be there, and the commitment is there, because the settlement has commitments, and those commitments should lead to specific outcomes. And that is what we're all hopefully striving for.
I would say my surprise, just to add into it, is being that I'm very family focused, is I honestly am really surprised how the state has put parents into leadership roles. We have parents who are co-chair of very important work groups. We have parents who are in charge of different subcommittees, the interagency governance team. Oof. Yeah. So, they have been put in responsible roles of leadership, not just coming to the table and sharing their voice, but again, really instrumental in directing how this program is developing. So, for me, that's huge. I just think that is really significant. Again, showing the commitment that the state is making, and giving parents who have a lot of skills the opportunity to use them in an area that maybe they hadn't used them before. But I think it's an important message, and it's making a difference. So with that, I want to thank you all for joining us. I think there's been a lot of good information that you've shared. I think it's very hopeful. And I think, like Howard said, it's really ambitious, and it's going to take time. But it seems like there is a dedicated team who is really committed to, building this house kind of one block at a time, or I guess I would say multiple walls are being worked on at one time, with the idea that eventually we're going to get to a place that we can put a roof on and really decorate the inside. But thank you for all the work that everyone here has done and continues to be involved in. So we'll see you guys back in a year.
Thank you.
Thank you much.
Thank you.
Next year.